Hi, Dr. Marcus here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the most common things that naturopathic doctors treat, and that is adrenal fatigue. It's something many people have heard of, that they're somewhat familiar with. I'm going to be going over the basic concepts, but also misconceptions or points of confusion about it. I'm going to go over a little bit of history because in natural health, when we have different experts giving their thoughts on some topic, it could be adrenal fatigue, it could be something else. In order to kind of filter out all this information to know what to listen to, it could be helpful to know where the ideas originally came from. Adrenal fatigue, it really started with Selye, and it goes all the way back to the 1950s. He didn't call it adrenal fatigue at the time. He was a researcher, doing animal studies, and what they do is put rats under stress, measure cortisol, do dissections, look at the size of the adrenal glands, and from this work is where the idea of the general adaptation syndrome came from. And what Selye said was that we have the stress hormone cortisol. When an animal is put under an acute stress, it goes up, and then you remove the stress and cortisol goes back down to normal. However, if that stress remains for a long period of time, the animal goes into this resistance phase, which means cortisol is staying chronically elevated all the time. If this keeps on going on, then eventually cortisol production is not going to be able to stay that high, and it drops, and you're going to go into this exhaustion stage of adrenal fatigue. Or rather, I should say the exhaustion stage of the general adaptation syndrome, as Selye called it. Now, conventional medicine has always had a bizarre relationship to the work on stress and cortisol. On one hand, there are literally thousands upon thousands of research articles about how stress is detrimental to just about any aspect of human physiology. On the other hand, as soon as you start talking about the stress hormone cortisol, conventional medicine denies that the whole thing is an issue to begin with. But just going back through history, this started with Selye, a medical doctor, researcher, completely conventional. Selye did write for a lay audience as well as research studies, and he did give general health advice about how we can't avoid stress and how important it is to manage stress. However, he wasn't a natural health care practitioner. He only put the concept out there so far in terms of clinical application. It was later on that two things happened which turned the adrenal fatigue into the well-known concept that it is today. The first is saliva cortisol testing. This gave practitioners a way to actually measure cortisol as it changes throughout the day. It changes so much that a single blood sample really isn't that relevant to tell someone go to a lab in the morning, we're going to look at your blood cortisol. But when you can measure saliva, you can have people do it throughout the day at different times, and you can see if cortisol really is suppressed or what is going on to their reactions to stress or what's going on when they're trying to sleep at night. So now natural healthcare practitioners had the tool to measure cortisol, and then James Wilson came out with his book on adrenal fatigue, the 21st century stress syndrome. And this is the book to read still on adrenal fatigue. Now, in this book, he doesn't just talk about the underlying physiology behind adrenal fatigue. He goes into a lot of detail over the saliva cortisol testing and also treatments of how to reduce stress and help the adrenal glands recover. Now, there hasn't been any big changes since. I'm in a field where everyone tries to put themselves out as the expert, that they have something unique or different. Look, if someone's talking about adrenal fatigue, then most of what they're saying is going to be based upon the work of Selye and Wilson. One big point of confusion that I see coming up a lot is what actually gets fatigued. In order for the adrenals to make cortisol, they have to be stimulated by the hypothalamus and pituitary in the brain. So the hypothalamus sits in the brain, and it tells the pituitary, which is this gland at the very bottom of the brain, to make this hormone called adrenocorticotrophic hormone, or ACTH. And ACTH tells the adrenals, make cortisol. So if you don't have ACTH, you're not going to have cortisol. So sometimes I've heard people say, well, the adrenals really don't become fatigued. It's ACTH, it's a brain issue. I'm going to break this down by comparing adrenal testing to thyroid testing. The most common thyroid test out there is TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, and that's released by the pituitary to tell the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. ACTH does the exact same thing when it comes to the adrenals. The difference in terms of testing is that ACTH is not a readily available test, while TSH is. So that means is that if there's a thyroid problem, you can test TSH. And if TSH is low, then you know that the brain is not making much TSH to stimulate the thyroid. If TSH is really high, you know that a lot of stimulation is coming in, but the thyroid isn't responding. With the adrenals, if you go into a naturopathic doctor and have your cortisol tested, they don't have ACTH available to test 4 times during the day. So there is no direct way to know how much stimulation there is from your brain to the adrenal glands. Something else that makes thyroid hormone easy to test is that we do have tests in the blood for T4 and T3. And unlike cortisol, thyroid hormone does not change so much from the morning to the night. You don't have 10 times more thyroid hormone in the morning than you do when you go to bed. So you can have your blood tested for T4 and T3, and while the test isn't perfect, it's going to kind of tell you about where you are. Whereas a blood test for cortisol is almost worthless. So we can say that with the thyroid testing, we can test the hormone made by the hypothalamus and pituitary. We could also test the hormone made by the thyroid itself, and we could see how much stimulation is coming in and what the output is. We don't have that available with cortisol testing. It doesn't matter how you're testing cortisol, whether it's saliva, blood, or urine. You're not testing ACTH. You don't know how much stimulation is coming in from the brain to the adrenals. So you don't know what's going on with the brain from these tests. One thing I can say about it, if you know your history and you read Selye, you know that he did research on rats. He put them under stress, cut them open, and looked at their adrenal glands. And what he saw was physical changes, anatomical changes to the adrenals in response to stress. Another reason why I suspect that there is adrenal dysfunction happening is that they have adrenal glandular supplements. And if you don't know what a glandula is, they basically take like a pig adrenal gland, dehydrate it, put it into a pill, and sell it to people. So this is basically the adrenal glands from animals as a supplement. And this doesn't replace the hormone directly, but they know that these do give specific nutritional support to whatever corresponding organ might be weak in someone. You know, someone doesn't have to use these if they don't want to. If they're a vegan, I support them, fine. But I'm just going to make the point that these do help certain people. And if the problem wasn't with the adrenals themselves, these probably wouldn't help. If the problem was just a brain issue, then taking adrenal glandulars probably wouldn't be very helpful. I'm going to give an overview of some other adrenal supplements, but the glandulars tend to work for some people who are really tired, although for others who are more sensitive to supplements, it might make them feel speedy, so they don't like it. Herbs are commonly used for the adrenals. We have this phrase called adaptogens. An adaptogen is simply an herb that helps balance a system one way or the other. So, for example, if your adrenals are underactive and you take an adaptogen, it'll help the adrenals make more cortisol. But if the adrenals are overactive and producing high cortisol because of an acute stress, that same adaptogen will tend to lower the excess cortisol. So there are many adaptogens out there. Licorice is one of those one of the more stimulating ones. Ashwagandha, rhodiola, Siberian ginseng. There's a whole bunch of different adaptogens. There's no such thing as the best adaptogen out there for everyone. That has to come down to the individual and what's going to work better for what person. For example, Karen ginseng is a great adaptogen, however, it's kind of warming. So if you have a hot constitution, you probably don't want to take it. Licorice is a great herb, but for, again, those people who are very sensitive, it might be a bit stimulating. Another type of herb that can help isn't necessarily an adaptogen, but it could just be herbs that calm down the nervous system. Because a lot of times what happens is we get into this tired but wired state, where maybe adrenal function is low, we need more cortisol, but our stress response is still there, so adrenaline, also called epinephrine, is very much elevated. So herbs that just calm down the nervous system, like milky oak tops or lemon balm, chamomile, those can kind of calm down the nervous system while we use other herbs to support the adrenals directly. B vitamins serve many functions, including helping the adrenals make cortisol. B12 can help with brain function, brain fog. Folate is a very popular supplement right now because of methylation issues. If you're in the natural health field long enough, you'll see that we get supplements that are hyped up for a while, then it dies down, then we have another one become hyped up in its place. So right now there's a lot of excitement over folate, and I know it helps people. A lot of people do have methylation issues. Folate helps them. It's not going to do as much for everyone as I think it's being hyped up right now as if it does do, but it is a good supplement in general. Some people make them feel speedy, like any of the B vitamins. A lot of times I'll see B1 is needed with this blood sugar issues and low adrenal function because it does a lot for sugar metabolism. But the other B vitamins might be useful as well. It can be a little hard to figure out which B vitamins are needed. On conventional lab tests, you can find some clues in terms of if you need B12 or folate, because then you can see your MCV elevated. But I'm not going to get into conventional lab work right now. There are also specialized lab work called organic acid tests that some practitioners run for B vitamins. Every once in a while, I'll run one of those, but usually I'll just muscle test someone in office. I can use some kinesiology to figure out if they need some B vitamins. It's pretty simple. Pregnenolone and DHEA. These are hormonal precursors that you can't buy as a supplement. So you can see that in the adrenals, in order to make cortisol, the body has to take cholesterol, convert it into pregnenolone, and then pregnenolone needs to be converted into cortisol. The conversion from cholesterol to pregnenolone is the most difficult step. So if you just supplement with pregnenolone directly, you're kind of bypassing that step and you're helping your body to make cortisol. Often it's helpful to take DHEA at the same time because the supplement pregnenolone is going to push cortisol pathway and DHEA is going to go to DHEA and then testosterone. However, if you do take these supplements, you should be working with a practitioner and running hormone lab tests. Because if you don't need these and you take them, they can get into problems of them pushing the hormonal pathways too hard. It can actually lead to symptoms of having too high androgens or testosterone, like male pattern baldness symptoms or acne. So you really want to be careful with these, but in the right case, it can really change someone around a lot. Of course, since cortisol is a stress hormone, anything else you can do to reduce stress helps. Meditation, lifestyle changes, exercise. It's all good. For how long are supplements needed? I get asked that question a lot. When it comes to stress response, if you're working a crazy job or you have some other crazy stress going on, then you're probably going to want to take something to help your body through it. Because, yeah, if you could just leave your life and go to some tropical island and just relax for a couple of months, then, yeah, you don't need any adrenal supplements. So, adrenal supplements are not the ideal answer, but they do help people deal with the stress of life that they're going through. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world where we can just change our surroundings so we're not under stress. We actually live in a society that puts people under way too much stress. And it would be great to change that society, but as a naturopathic doctor, I can only work on people one individual at a time. You need to remember that stress is the body's non-specific response to any additional demand. So if you're tired, the adrenals are probably going to be involved to some degree because we live in such a stressful world. However, we have so many other things that can cause fatigue. Allergies, toxicity, infections, pain. These are the big ones. Any additional stress can burden the adrenals. So if there's a toxicity issue or an allergy or an infection, not only does that directly cause problems, but that's going to put an additional burden on the adrenals. So usually when it comes to treating adrenal issues, I don't make that the priority with my clients. I'm actually looking at the more underlying issue going on. Because typically they come in and get with the allergies, toxicities, stealth infections, all that sort of stuff, nutritional deficiencies, and all that's putting additional stress on the adrenals. So what I'll typically do is maybe do one thing for the adrenals, one or two things, and then we'll work on what the more foundational underlying issue is. I look at the adrenals and the stress response, again, as something that is responding to the foundational stress. And we want to work on as much a root level as possible. So simply trying to flog the adrenals with supplements because someone is tired is not the answer. What we want to do is support the adrenals so they can recover while treating the real underlying issue, the real major stress the person is going through. I just want to finish up with some comments on conventional medicine because they have this idea that either you have Addison's disease, Cushing's disease, or your adrenals are perfect. There's no concept in conventional medicine of function. They only see disease. So I guess from their perspective, it's true. If you don't have Addison's disease and you don't have Cushing's disease, then you don't have an adrenal disease. That doesn't mean your adrenals are fine. Remember, cortisol is the body's major stress hormone. You can say that stress affects health, yet deny at the same time that cortisol is anything to worry about. And this is what conventional doctors do all the time. If you go in there and you're tired, you're not feeling well, and they don't see an answer on your lab test, often they'll just tell someone that you're under stress. At the same time, if you then ask them if cortisol is an issue, they say cortisol can't be an issue. Well, it either is or it isn't. Cortisol is the body's stress hormone. If stress is a problem, cortisol is a problem. So I'll kind of just finish up with that. Okay, thank you for watching, everyone. Hey, bye.